Hello, everybody, and welcome to our class on GitHub. I am currently here on our GitHub website, and we're going to learn about GitHub and clone the entire class today onto your GitHub so that you can work in class and push it to your own GitHub instead of having to come here anymore. So today we're in classes, O2 getting Git, connecting to Git. And this is the code we're going to go through today on how to connect to GitHub and start a new site, connect your laptop to GitHub or your server to GitHub, and start tracking your coding changes and pushing them to your repository. Okay, so we're going to start from scratch as if you have never done this before. This same code is the code I'm going to be using here. Yeah, so let's just pretend like we just started our first GitHub site. So the first thing you have to do is go to GitHub and sign up. And so I just made this RIN test site here for teaching how to connect to this. And so the first thing we need to do is make a connection between our computer or our server to GitHub. And we're going to send a public encrypted key to GitHub to say, hey, you can recognize my computer, we're friends, we can exchange information. And so that's the next step we need to do is connect our computer. So I'm going to do it locally here. So if you're just on a regular computer, you can do this, but also do it for the class on where we'd want to look on Fiji, on a server we're going to be using. Okay, so in your home directory, so if you go cd tilde, there's a directory called .ssh. On most computers, we can go there and do this here, and we can see this .ssh folder here. And so I'm gonna just clear that. And so we're gonna go into that folder and look at what we have here. And so what we have is you probably already have this key in there, idrsa.pub and idrsa here. If so, stop, don't do anything. It's not great to have two different keys. I've made a second one just so we can teach this, but it's not a great idea. And I can explain more why and how I got around this at the end of the video. Okay, so you have your key, and if you want to look at it, you can just do concatenate and look at what the contents of it are. I'm not going to show mine just for safety reasons, on a university computer. So, so then if you don't have one, we can make one. I'll just walk through that real quick since I have a workaround here. So if you didn't have one, you could use this command here, ssh keygen, for type RSA encoding, and then you want to name the file. So it's usually idrsa, and you want to leave it there. It'll make two files, one idrsa and one id_rsa.pub. So you can do that. I'm going to do 3 just because I have some in here. And I'm going to leave the passphrase empty. So hit enter, enter. Then I get this cool encryption. And now I can send this to other servers and say, hey, we've made a connection to this computer. Okay, so I'm actually going to remove those real quick because I don't want a third key causing GitHub troubles. And you'll probably see why, and I'll explain more later at the end of the video. Okay. So, okay, there we are. So we have now keygen. And so if we go back there, I'm going to cat this idrsa2 .pub. And you'll see the key we're going to need here is ssh.rsa, and just copy and paste that into our brand new Git repository up here in the top right where you see your logo. You can go into settings and CPG keys. Here's how GitHub needs to know who you are. And I'm going to just call this Git class because I'm going to delete it in a minute, so it won't be useful. Okay, so we now have an SSH key that is from my local laptop to GitHub. So anything I clone or download, I can push to my to this repository and it's safe. Okay, that is great. And now we're connected. And so we're going to go back to our main homepage, and we can see we don't have any repositories yet. And so what we want to do is get our class, all the documents needed for class are in a GitHub repository on Boulder RIN Lab, and you want to bring it to your GitHub website and be able to work on it and make changes to your GitHub site. So to do that, we're going to make a new repository and call it class 2023, because that's the name of the one we're about to clone. And it will just show up here. It's really cool. It's great use of GitHub that so many people have written useful code that you can just copy it quickly and then work on it and exchange and actually collaborate as well. So, okay, so we're going to make this new repository and we're just going to leave it. We're going to just leave it here. We're going to then go back to our terminal and clone the class GitHub onto our computer. So for those of you in class, you're going to do the same thing. It's worth seeing again that in your main home directory, you're going to have a .ssh file. Here it is there. And so we're going to cd into that file. And we can see you have an ID RSA, so you'll .pub, you'll cat that and paste it into your GitHub settings up here. And you can have 2 keys. So now the server knows to talk to GitHub and your laptop. Okay, so now we are all connected, and we can clone the GitHub website. So in class, you're going to go to your folder on Fiji. It's here. And for me, I'm going to do it locally so that this is universally applicable for everybody. And so I'm just on my local laptop here. And I've created I'm going to go to my home directory and find a directory to clone it in. So you can do this at home in any place you want on your computer. So I'm going to go into documents, and I've made this test space. There's nothing in here. And so we're going to start to use Git. We're going to do our first Git move and Git clone. And so you can get this, no pun intended, you can get this code on GitHub. And so the best way to do that is here. You can go look in Boulder RIN class, search for that. And the class we want is class 2023. And there's this nice code button here. And you just go to the SSH, so you don't have to type your password in every time. If you use HTTPS, you will have to put your username and password in every time, and that's not fun. So you can copy that, and that is the same code you would get from navigating there yourself. And so then we're going to use this command git clone, and that code we just copied there. And so we just go to our terminal, paste that in. And now this folder that was once empty has the whole class in it. So I can move in there, and I can see classes, go in there, and we're in O2 getting Git. And so there we are. You now have the whole class structure. We'll navigate into each of these folders sort of stepwise, learn different skills along the way. And so now we have in here, class 2023 showed up, and I'm inside there and have all the stuff we need for class. Okay, so that's great. So now I have it on my computer, but now I want to push it to GitHub's website. And so the language we're using is Git. It's like Bash or something, like another language. But GitHub is just a website of archiving that using the Git language to track differences. Okay, So now what we have to do is do some Git configuration, and we're going to do a little bit more of this in a minute. But the first thing we want to do is tell our computer where on GitHub we want to push to. And that is, or push our data to. And so it's archived on the web. And that is your Git repo that you just made. So basically, this is your GitHub name, and then the repo name is class 2023 Git, and will be the same as this code here. So I'm going to set my origin, remote origin, to go to my new Git site that I just signed up for, which has nothing in it currently. So again, I'm gonna, looks like I didn't finish making that repository, or I don't have any popular repositories, and I don't have any, so I'm gonna make a new one and call it class 2023 and create the repository and just leave it there, just like this. Okay, so now it looks like this, and now we're going to push to there, and it's going to turn into the class. This is awesome. So we have set where we're going to go is to this RIN test site and this new repository, class 2023, and we're good on that front. So now what we're going to do is push for the first time. And we'll go through the commands and make a new file in a second, but this is just to get set up. This is the only time you're going to have to do it this way, where you have the -- set upstream origin master. After this, you can just do git push, and we'll go over that in a second. But to get the first time to get it up there, we're going to do this, and here we go. And great stuff is happening. Cool. So now if we come back here and refresh our GitHub website, we have the class just like that. So we can go in here, we can go into all the classes you're going to end up getting to see, and each of them having their own sort of code document. And voila, on your GitHub website, you can now push from your computer, and students in the class from Fiji as well, our server, where we're going to be doing all of this. Okay, excellent. So we've now made and cloned a Git repository from somebody else and put it in our own Git website. That's a really useful skill. And along the way, you can pick up lots of people's code, and people like to make it compiled so that you can just use it. Okay, so now to sort of go through the main, if you have to remember one thing, remember git add, git commit, and git push. And always do those check your git status to make sure everything's tracking. So let's say we made a new file and you're working in class and you wanted to make a new RMD file. We can just make one real quick. I'm just going to check, make sure I'm in the right spot. Yep. Okay, so let's nano and make this test RMD and say, hope this pushes, because this should work, but this doing it from scratch is always tricky. Okay, and Control X, yes, and out. And now we can check our status, and let's do that with git status. So everything's going to have a prefix of git to call up that language. And we can see, oh, there's an untracked file here. So there's a test.rmd. Let's add that. So we're going to do git add test rmd. Okay, now if we look at our git status, we can see, ooh, there's a new file, it's being tracked. Okay, so now Git knows to track this file. And so we're gonna now push this to our Git repository. So first we got to commit it. So we added it, now we're gonna commit it, and then -m is for a message. And okay, so now I've committed it, and if I look now, it says nothing to commit, the working thing is clean. So now Git has received the information and has tracked any changes that have been made. And so now I can just push it with git push. And I go back to my Git repository here, and I can see the changes that I've made are already right here. And we have our test RMD, which did push. And so now, as an exercise at the end of the class, I suggest making a git ignore and putting in a bunch of files you don't want to track. GitHub is mostly just for your code text and tracking changes. So if you delete something, you can always go back, which is really another handy aspect of GitHub. Okay, so that is great. We've made a new file and committed it. The next thing you want to check on your GitHub, if you really care, this is not essential. If I go to my main site here, I can see that I've made some contributions and people can watch your activity. If you're looking to apply for jobs, having a bunch of activities is not a bad idea. And so you'll get tracked for that. Now, if you set up your GitHub with a different email than the one that's default on your computer, we can sort of take a look and see what's going on there with git config -- list. So we're going to do that here. And we can see all the sort of properties we have. So my user email is this one, and that's the same one I made RIN test site with. So that's why the button turns green. If yours didn't, that's because you have a different email. And so I'll show you how to change that in a second. And we can see we set our remote origin here to this repository. So it's now knows what's going on and where to put stuff. Great. Okay, so going back here now, we are all set. And that's sort of the, oh, sorry, if you want to change your username, doesn't really matter, but it's up to you. But the email does need to be the same as the GitHub website sign up email, so it knows to track your activity. Okay, so that is all we need to do. So we went from having a no GitHub website, signing up, connecting with our SSH, keys, making keys, and cloning, going to somebody else's repository, cloning that folder or set of code, and pushing it now to your own Git repository. Okay. So there's a much easier way to do this. I wanted to show you the sort of fundamental way so that you can really kind of understand some Git bash, if you will, or some Git language. But there's a great feature here called fork. So I can go I'm on my RIN test site here. I'm going to jump back to Boulder RIN Lab. I'm not logged in. And let's do class 2022. And instead of doing the code that we did before, we can just hit this fork button and do everything we just did. That sounds great and everything, but if this button disappeared, it's good to know how to do it in the terminal and without any sort of interface. And there's another way you can work with Git is just without an interface. You don't need GitHub or GitLabs. You can just do it on your terminal. So now if I fork this, I now have this in my RIN test site. I now have this class, which is last year's class. So kind of cool, one click, and we did everything we had just done, but it's good to know what's going on and what Git's thinking about in that background information. And so that is all for today. And I have an exercise for you to make some files down there. A git ignore is a really important file to have, so it doesn't track like figures, like PDFs or big files and things like that. So we are all connected,